Georgia. Tonight, this is a special edition of Focus on Liberia. We're going to be discussing the Liberian economy, specifically the challenges and the prospects of Liberia's economic growth and development. With me to discuss this, so I have one financial analyst and consultant, Mr. Alex Chuchu Jones. Alex, welcome to Focus on Liberia.
Thank you very much.
Also, to discuss this very important topic, I have an economist and Professor Dr. George Gonpu. Dr. Gonpu, welcome to Focus on Liberia.
Thank you, Dennis. I'm happy to be here.
Great. And I want to welcome all our viewers across the globe. This is Wednesday, August 21st, 2019. This special edition of Focus on Liberia will be focusing on the Liberian economy, specifically the prospects, the challenges of Liberia growth, economic growth and development. By the way, this is going to be trying to be a series that we're going to have this on a continual basis. This is the first in the edition of our economic forum. And this is a special edition. This is the forum in collaboration with Focus on Liberia will be presenting a series on the economy for as long as we can take. So keep tuned, you're going to enjoy this. First, I want to start, just as a teaser, we want to say welcome again to this. We're going to be posting our phone numbers. We want all of you to sit tight and enjoy the show. Post your comments, ask questions. We're going to be delving into our economy. So to start this, by way of introduction, let me introduce my guests. First, we have Dr. George Gonpu. He has taught econometrics, finance, macroeconomics, and money and banking at several U.S. universities, including Cleveland State University, Grand Valley State University, Hunter College of the City of University of New York, Manhattan College, Rutgers University, New Brunswick, and College of Staten Island. In Liberia, Dr. Gonpu has taught economics at the Ibrahim Babangida Graduate School and also at the undergraduate level at the University of Liberia. He formerly served as Deputy Finance Minister and Budget Director, Republic of Liberia. Currently, he's teaching economic development, macroeconomics, and management statistics at Ramapo State College of New Jersey. His research interests are in applied international macroeconomics, economics of development, and fiscal, monetary, and public policy. Dr. Gonpu is enthusiastic about public service and has served as president of the Liberian Community Association of Illinois and as Secretary General of the Chicago chapter of the United Nimba Citizen Council. In addition, he has served as president of the Liberian Studies Association. Once again, Dr. Gonpu, welcome to Focus on Liberia.
Thank you, Dennis. I'm happy to be here.
We too, we are very delighted to have you. Second is Mr. Alex Chuchu Jones. His current employer is consultant at Citibank. His areas of expertise, equity, finance, investment banking, and business. Mr. June was born in Liberia to a Senegalese father and a Liberian mother. At the age of 13, he experienced the horror of the Liberian Uncivil War, displacement, hunger, and fear during the Liberian Uncivil War, which claimed the lives of over 200,000 people, including his father. As a result of the Uncivil War, he moved around West Africa and eventually migrated to the United States in 1996. After studying engineering, business, and finance, and earning a dual bachelor's from Franklin University in Columbus, Ohio, he moved to New York City to work on Wall Street, where he became involved in global trading, international planning, and global development. Mr. Jones writes and speaks extensively on financial and business issues, including investment, banking, urban and global development and the economics of poor countries and communities. He's the founder and CEO of the Black Education Foundation and the Black Education Television. He's also the author of all 5 of the Development Manifesto formula, the Development Manifesto, a formula to dismantle inequality and promote urban and global development. Mr. Jones will soon publish that book, and he can be reached at alexcj@blackeducationfoundation.com. Mr. Jones, once again, welcome to Focus on Liberia.
Thank you, Dennis. It's a great pleasure to be here.
Well, I'm excited about this brand new series on Focus on Liberia, discussing our economy. Tonight's topic is the challenges and the prospects of Liberia's economic growth and development. So let me start by saying, how significant is it to have a discussion on the Liberian economy? Let me start with you, Mr. Jones.
Well, I think in times like these, when there's a very crucial need, it's a very crucial need for the discussion, because economics play a central role in any economy. And as a result, the lack of development, economic development, growth, employment in Liberia, you find a lot of civil disobedience. You find destitution, and recently we saw what unfolded this weekend. So it's very crucial that we begin to talk about these things from an economic perspective. And so I'm very pleased to be here to discuss this with Dr. Gonpu, who happens to be a colleague and a friend as well.
Thank you. Dr. Gonpu, anything to add on the significance of this discussion?
Well, I endorse the statement that Alex just made. Clearly, the economy is central to even the survival of the state. When you look at Liberia's history, one of the reasons why Liberia has had so many problems can be explained by the economy. So the strength of the economy and the challenges that the economy faces, or the challenges that the economy faces, have implications for stability, it has implications for the happiness of the people. And clearly, even though some of the problems may look political, but governance issue and even the strength of families is highly connected to what is happening in the economy. So it is important to discuss these and to have an opportunity to share ideas and to identify some of the problems that we face as a nation, and to think about how those problems can be solved. Clearly, if we can uncover some of the prospects in terms of solutions, then it might be one step closer to bringing opportunities to our people, and also it might be a step closer to helping to strengthen our country. So I think it is important, highly important.
Good. And unfortunately, these discussions are most of the time absent from our discussion, because politics is very enticing and other entertainment, but some still talk about economics. And I give you an example of, because if we don't get experts like you or people who know a little more to discuss these things, someone is going to fill the void. I had an experience of watching, and no disrespect to those that were on the show, but I had an experience where economy was being discussed. And I want to share it with you as a little clip to begin the show, so that you see that if you don't discuss it, well, Dr. Gonpu, somebody else is discussing it. Let me share with you a clip on someone discussing the economy. The first country, the national anthem playing.
No national anthem. Doesn't understand playing? I don't know the championship. I'm the championship. All right. Now you go off. Okay, off. So the government, we deal with corruption, stronger law. Okay. Then we have to regulate goods and services. Okay. The goods that are on the market, let me tell you something. You don't have a fixed price. Everybody get their own price. All those things can cause inflation. Okay, it can cause inflation because inflation is higher price, and your currency is valueless. Okay, so we need to regulate goods and services. It needs everything the country needs to get fixed price, so nobody can take advantage of it and create their own price. Okay, then our workers that work for different entities, the government needs to regulate their salary, fixed salary. So the men, they're paying 200. The other men are working for Indian men that do small job, pay the same 200. We have to regulate goods and services. So when we put those things in order, when nobody can create their own, price for themselves, and nobody can treat our people anyhow and pay them any kind of way they want to pay them, then we'll get the country moving. Okay. Then we'll be talking about supply. Where the supply, the people need and want. The government needs to supply what the people want. Okay? The government needs to supply it. The government is not supplying what the people want. Supply and demand. They're not supplying the people demand. Because why is the Liberian demand? Liberian people want food. At the first thing, enter back and last thing. Liberian people want food. That's the demand. So the government should be able to supply that demand. How the government going to supply that demand? Is the government responsibility to take food to everybody's house? You know that?
All right. That's just a short clip of economics being discussed, demand and supply and price control. You are laughing.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. There will be so many sources of information on analysis and presentation of solution to the problems facing the country. But I think you started a series with an introduction where you provided some background information on myself and Alex as well. So I think the discussions that we will have on this forum is going to be informed by a little more than common sense. It should be informed, our discussion will be informed by some of the leading theorists in the field of economics, especially with respect to monetary and fiscal policy, and also with taking into consideration best practices around the world, what works. Because there are so many different avenues for discussing economics. There are people who believe, even in the United States, there are people who believe they understand economics because they can balance their checkbooks, they have their own bank account, and therefore, in their view, that is the economy, and they sit at their kitchen table and discuss the economy the best way they know how. There are other people who prefer to leave it to experts whose knowledge is backed by credentials and experience and theories and other kind of worldview. So there will be so many different ways to get information on the economy. So I think it's better to present our analysis and let people decide, what makes sense. Let people decide what will work. Our own experience with the Liberian economy and in the Liberian society has been such that even going back to the days of the campaign. There were so many candidates who promised that it was easy to bring down prices and make life easy for everyone. And they were able to have forum where they were discussing, in fact, the president himself discussing scarcity and how do you control the price of goods when things are scarce. And now he has an opportunity to do that. And we see the difference. So I don't want for us to spend much of our time dwelling into so many different approaches of many Liberians, especially those analyses that have been presented on a number of these Facebook presentations. It's better to try to focus on what we think is our approach to looking at the challenges and to provide evidence that support the views that we will present, or that, again, let me speak for myself, that I will be presenting. Right. That would be my response for short. I don't want to really get into to debating someone's view of the economy. I think it's better to present the views and to help the public decide why a particular way of thinking about the economy or why a particular way of solving the economic problem is a better way to go, rather than spending our time on each and every analyst out there who present their perspective on how to address the economic challenges.
Thank you, Dr. Gonpu. And I shared that video not to take a jab at anyone, but just to show you and the public that there are economic theorists out there. And we hope this show focus on Liberia, especially our economic forum, is going to enlighten most people. So we encourage everyone to tune in. We're going to be announcing, a schedule somewhere in the future to tell you that this is going to be a regular thing that is coming your way, so that you can log on and get understanding. Because if you want information out there, you're going to get it. But we want to be, to direct you somewhere where you get credible information that you can use. So let me be clear, Mr. Jones. Demand and supply does not mean the people want something, you give it to them. That was a joke. All right, let's go. Let's go into our show tonight. We want to be dealing with the prospects and the challenges, or the challenges and the prospects of Liberia's economic growth and development. There are a lot of challenges, as we can see in our economy. I want us to start. What I hear most people talking about as a challenge for our economy, I don't know if that's true or not, but you can tell us, is corruption and the rule of law. Does that have any link to the economy? How and why?
Well, thank you, Dennis. And again, just to add, to buttress what was said earlier, I think it's a very important forum to discuss Liberia economy specifically, because one, there's no other forum that I know of that I could participate in and learn from it, and also share my own views on it. So I think thank you, first of all, and your team at Focus on Liberia. You guys are doing a marvelous job. I watch it on a regular basis. You have great guests, and so please keep up the good work, you and your staff. Having said that, yes, corruption and the rule of law is very important. In fact, without the rule of law or without some civility, you wouldn't have an economy. So to say that, any country can survive much longer without rule of law and have an economy that is flourishing or even in existence, is impossible. So it's very important. I would say it's one of the most important aspects of economic development and growth. that you have stability, political stability, you have business stability, and there are trade amongst people domestically and internationally. And for that, you need a strong government, that you need good judiciary system, you need networks, transportation, you need also very good educational system. So those are, I would say, the bedrock on which you can build a flourishing economy.
Yeah, and just to jump in there, the corruption and the rule of law as it relates to the economy, it's highly significant. Corruption is destructive. And so the functioning, the effective functioning of the different sectors of the economy. So for example, the healthcare system. Government rely on the hospitals to treat employees, even the private sector. So many institutions in the private sectors do not have their own medical system, to rely on the medical system that exists in the economy. Now, when corruption is excessive, you can have situations where medicine might be supplied to hospitals, or equipment could be supplied to hospitals as supported by the government budget. But when there is widespread corruption, hospital workers can supplement their pay by just looting those medical supplies and equipment. Same thing can be said about schools. When there is widespread corruption and there is no rule of law, teachers can begin to trade grades. The grade can be traded for money, and grade can be traded for all kinds of favors. And that can be a disincentive for students to work harder. But we rely on these same institutions to supply our civil servants, to supply our medical doctors, and to supply engineers in all of the different fields, and people train all different fields. So when you have widespread corruption, you can begin to turn out graduates who have not really done the work. But because the system is corrupt, they can buy their grades, and they can get their grades through deals, and they can get their degrees, and they get out there, and now they have to do surgery on your child, having bought all of their credentials. And that is a problem. So corruption is detrimental to the functioning of the economy, because again, if you don't have good human capital in terms of workers, then you cannot really produce. And if you can't produce, then there's a problem. So take, for example, revenue collection. Government cannot fund its projects and programs and budget if the revenues are not paid, and if they are not adequately reported. But when you have widespread corruption and impunity, then of course, those revenue agents are not going to be reporting what they collect. It is because of that, because of this recognition that corruption is so important, that our constitution, the Liberian Constitution, in Article 3 of the Constitution, is it Article 3? Article 5, right? Article 5 of the Constitution. Okay? There is provision that government must take action to eradicate corruption, or at least to fight corruption. Yeah. This connection between corruption and the stability of the state, corruption and the prosperity of the state in terms of the economy was recognized. And that's why you have it in the Constitution.
Right. I see it right here.
Right, and it's right, you see it there in Article 5.
Article 5 C.
Section C, yes.
Yeah.
So,
right.
Yeah.
Dr. Gonpu, you mentioned one key word, that's the human capacity. So that too, I believe, is a challenge, the human capacity, the human capital capacity gap. Let's discuss human capacity when it comes to some of the challenges that our economy is facing.
Well, I mean, the human capacity issue is related to development in the sense that the most critical element in the inputs into development is the workers. So the skills, the training, the experience of the workers translate into productivity. Part of the reason why people make more in the United States in terms of income is because the workers here have more human capital. On average, they have more experience, they have their productivity is much higher, they can work with more sophisticated machines, and all of that help them to be highly productive. So when it comes to our society, there's a huge human capital gap. And again, that is also related to the issue of mismanagement and corruption, in the sense that following the Civil War, you prefer to call it uncivil war, I at least prefer to call it, but there was a huge human capital flight. There was a destruction of the rule of law. People never felt safe. So many people fled. And under the military regime, it was difficult to be sure that your rights will be protected. So the human capital flight migration took away, or it caused us to lose so many trained people. And at the same time, since the Civil War, during the Civil War, we're not really investing much in education and training our people. Until now, we still have a very weak educational system. See? Very weak educational system. The laws are there, but the laws are not being effectively enforced. See? And that's part of the reason why, for example, again, in order to develop our human capital, there has to be commitment and dedication. If we don't have people who can do the work, even when we attract foreign investment, those foreign investors most of the time have to look for skilled people.
Right.
Go to ArcelorMittal, for example. ArcelorMittal, they tell me so many of the engineers there are from other countries, including African countries. So what do they have that we don't have as Liberians? It's because, again, the amount of investments they've made in their human capital. And so we can bring, ArcelorMittal is bringing Ghanaians, engineers. So that means the income that is being generated from the operation of these companies, are a significant portion of them tend to be moving out of the country and not really going to help Liberians.
I agree.
You see, so the investment, the lack of adequate investment in our human capital is a major development challenge. And although government makes a commitment to that human capital development, the private sector has its part, but the government basically takes the lead. And to ensure that is why it has been said that corruption and fighting corruption is critical. Mm-hmm. In fact, the last election that was held, the CDC, one of the reasons why so many people supported the CDC was because people thought that there was confidence that the CDC government was going to be very strong in fighting the war against corruption. And it's not to say that corruption will be zero in our society, but if corruption increases, then there is a problem in the sense that those good laws on the books will not be enforced. If the laws are not enforced, we'll not get the resources invested in education as it should be in order to develop our human capital.
Good. Let me go to you, Alex. I know if you want to add up to the subject of human capital capacity gap, but I want to take you to institutions. Right. I want you to speak to institutions, especially weak institution, has a factor or has a challenge to Liberia's economic growth and development. And when I talk about institution, I'm talking about even our 3 branches of government. I'm talking about our city bank or central bank. I'm talking about our Ministry of Finance and Development Planning, and all these different institutions. If they are weak, of course, that's a challenge. Do you agree?
Yeah, it's a kind of tricky question, because then again, which one has a heavier weight? Is it the legislator or the executive? If you have both of them that are strong and you have a weak judicial system, then obviously you can have good laws and you can charge people with crimes, but then the court system is going to be an issue with bribery and so forth. So for me personally, what I think is Liberia needs total reform, total constitutional and institutional reform. What we have in Liberia is a joke. If we think that, we can use the current system that was orchestrated on a corrupt mechanism, by that I'm saying where you either had a one-party system or you have a populist president, they pass laws that were favorable, they put the people in the House of Representatives, then it's a joke. You saw that in Rwanda, you see that in Ghana, you saw that in South Korea, Singapore. What these people did was, after the war, they sat down, they brought the best and brightest, and they crafted a system, and they created an institution specifically designed to fight corruption. We don't have that in Liberia. Even our quote unquote democratic system, it's more of, if you have more money, you win the election, you have more popularity, you get more airtime. So that's my view. I don't think currently the systems in Liberia are designed to fight corruption. And so that's why we spend all this money and time and we get nowhere. And we just keep electing new presidents, new House of Representatives. So I'm not convinced. And I don't see any evidence. And I've studied development around the world. And I don't know of any country that has come from low income to high income without total reform. Whether it was Germany after the war, America, for instance, after their civil war, they had to come with the institute entities. For instance, the Federal Reserve just came around in 1914. And that was because of the incident that took place in 1907 when it had the stock market collapse after a series of collapse. So as a country evolves and change, the laws, the constitutions, and all of the institutions will have to be created. We saw that again in the dot-com industry. Before, there were no laws for anything that had to do with cyber crimes and things like that. But when we started to create internet and we started to create computer and networking and online banking, the Congress had to institute laws and set up department. Our problem is we want to use a system, an institution that was set up in 1847 or 1983 to fight current day issue. So all of those institutions, I think, are very broken. I would say, especially the Central Bank of Liberia. If there's one institution that I would think that should lead the way in fighting corruption, would be the Central Bank of Liberia, the Federal Reserve in this case, because that's the only institution that's responsible for creating money. No other institution can create currency besides the central bank. No other institution in Liberia or much of the world can create policy that affect supply of money or the quantity of money. So if we don't, our central bank, in my opinion, is very antiquated. They don't have the structure. They don't have the different instruments. They don't have the technology. People still traveling with moving money from, the port of Monrovia, millions of dollars. That's why money is getting missing. These days, You have what you call e-money, where the central bank just puts the money electronically in a bank's account and it can track it that way. All of these possibilities are available today, thank goodness. With the technology we have today, we can create a first-class, first-rated central bank. We can get on the, we can go to a cashless system within no time. They're already doing it. You already see in things like mobile money in places like Nigeria and Ghana and Rwanda. So strap up this system. I'm not saying shut down the central bank or the legislature today or tomorrow, but what I'm proposing is it's about time Liberians get together and start to discuss, what is all the different parties. I'm not a political person, so I can care less about who on whose side. But let the political leadership get together and see the need of the suffering of the people. And let them now bring experts in to examine the system, the whole total structure, and then come up with a good recommendation on how do we want our central bank to be. And one recommendation would be, number one, we should decentralize the central bank. Our central bank district or entity should be in every county. So that way you have a more decentralized economy. You look at the Federal Reserve in America, there's 13 districts. There's not one. So all of those things, when we talk about institution, I know it's easier to blame one government or another, but we haven't done a good job in terms of especially the professionals of Liberia, me included, and that's why I decided to come more out and give my expertise. So I'll stop there and allow Dr. Gonpu to touch base on some of these things.
And Dr. Gonpu, you work as Deputy Minister at the Ministry of Finance and Development Planning. And we are talking about weak institutions being a challenge to Liberia's economic growth and development. Your thoughts?
Yeah, when I suggest make some clarification, when I was Deputy Minister, the ministry was still the Ministry of Finance. It had not integrated yet with the Ministry of Planning. It was in process. But yeah, institutions are important to the development of the economy and to the development of any society. We have three branches of government. The legislative branch is responsible for making laws and also for providing oversight when it comes to the issue of the implementation of the law. The implementation of the law, which is basically the enforcement of the law, is on the executive. And then the judiciary, which is another institution which runs the court, basically interprets the law. So when there are conflicts, the judiciary is guided by the Constitution and the statutes to then say what the law say with respect to this particular conflict at hand. So I think in Liberia, I agree that reforms are needed. A number of reforms have been done, have been implemented under the Salif government. There was some reform that was demanded by the international community in order to help Liberia go through the HIPIC program, which helped to eliminate nearly $5 billion of the country's debt. So during that period, Liberia created what is called the PFM law, which is the Public Financial Management Law. It has rules in that law with respect to what different institutions are responsible for doing, how the budget is supposed to be structured, when the budget is supposed to be reported. By April 15, the draft of the budget should be coming from the executive to the legislature, giving the legislature time to review the budget, debate the budget, and so forth. In recent times, this particular budget has been one of the latest. The budget, I think, went to the legislature, if I'm not mistaken, late in July, when in fact the fiscal year had already begun. And the law says that it should be there by April 15. And there's also the PPCC law, which requires competition when it comes to government contracts and government purchases. Yeah? There is also the Saliva administration also created what is called or helped to rebuild what is called the LACC, the Liberia Anti-Corruption Commission. So all of these institutions were developed in order to bring reform to the system, to restructure the system. There's also the Governance Commission that is supposed to be helping in advising the government with respect to ideas and ideas with respect to decentralization and other areas. But I think the institutions, the legislature has not been very strong in playing its role, not just in making laws, but especially when it comes to providing oversight. So that's why, for example, the Constitution requires that no political appointment can be done for someone to take an office unless there is advice and consent of the Senate. So when we look across government and the issue of human capital, okay, the Senate has basically been approving whatever recommendation the executive brings. So as a result, you have people across government who are basically political people, especially when it comes to technical positions. And this is not just about the WIA administration. I think this has been happening before, because the issue of the Salif family and some of the strategic positions they held across the government also raised some eyebrow. There was one time that the president Salif even nominated her son at the central bank. And there were a lot of pushback in the society, okay? And the president basically argued that, she were appointing these people because they were qualified. But the Senate and civil society pushed back. And in a number of cases, I think she was under a lot of pressure with respect to Robert Salif's appointment and other issues. But the point is that the legislature has not been very strong in exercising its function, especially when it comes to the issue of oversight. As we speak today, there have been some discussion in the legislature with respect to the recent electoral violence. And this is not new. This has been happening for a while now. And there have been no real serious discussion and oversight and maybe call for dismissal, of people in the police if they are not doing their jobs. So on the executive side, with respect to the enforcement, we got so many laws on the books. It is the executive responsibility to enforce these laws. So for example, take the law of the law requiring public officials to declare their assets before they assume new offices and to declare their assets when they are departing those offices. The executive have been really weak in enforcing that law. And till now, there are still discussions going on to convince the president to make his asset, which has been declared public so that the public can know where he stands asset-wise. And if the president is not transparent with respect to that simple law, the declaration of asset, and now he is the chief law enforcer, right, how can he really go out to require other people in the executive to declare their assets? You see? So these things have something to do with the institutional strength. And to me, one of the things that have happened in Liberia is that we are quick to pass laws. And when it comes to implementation, we stumble. So that's one of the challenges that we have. Sometimes if we think that this law is not good for us, it's better to debate it and give reason why we should not pass that law. But once we pass the law, the credibility of our society is on the line. We cannot joke around with it anymore. once you agree to it as the law on the books, you know, you have to take steps to make sure you enforce those laws, because people are not going to force you to obey your own laws, but the international community, the entire globe is watching. If you cannot obey your own laws, then how can we trust you with the amount of loans that you want?
Right. And it's important that we are talking about these various institutions, because anytime we talk about the economy and institutions, our minds run straight to financial institutions. But from what you're saying is it cuts across. It goes to lawmakers, it goes to the judiciary, the executive, all over the place.
It cuts across. Take, for example, the central bank that Alice just talked about. The central bank is critical to wealth creation in this society. If you have an active, effective central bank where the officials, you know, are selected on the basis of merit and on the basis of technical expertise, the central bank can do wonders in helping our society become prosperous.
Like how? I mean, let's deal with that central bank role.
Okay, the central bank is the custodian of government financial asset. It advises the government on macroeconomic policy issues, that is policy that relates to employment, overall employment in society, policies that relate to prices, policies that relate to interest rate, the exchange rate, which affects everyone. Okay. So if you have an effective central bank that knows what it's doing, then your currency is likely to be stable. See, your currency is likely to be stable. And when your currency is stable, people can worry less about how to beat the inflation rate and how to beat the interest rate, and focus on the area of expertise which you need in order for the economy to produce. So for example, 10 years ago, the exchange rate was about maybe $50 or 60 Liberian dollars to $1. Today, the exchange rate is over 200. Okay. So if you had $1,000, $1,000 Liberian dollars in the bank 10 years ago, when the exchange rate was around maybe 50 Liberian dollars, then that 1,000 Liberian dollars could get you about $500 in US dollars in terms of goods and services you could buy from abroad. Okay, but the exchange rate now has gone to 200. So that 1,000 Liberian dollars is worth very little right now.
Yeah,
significantly little. So all of that has to do with central banking and central banking functions.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, if you are just joining us, this is Focus on Liberia. We are discussing the challenges and prospects of Liberia's economic growth and development. My guests are Dr. Josh Gonpu and Mr. Alex Jones. Alex, let's go to some macroeconomic challenges, talking about inflation, talking about joblessness or unemployment, taxation and all those different things. How do they, pose some challenges to Liberia's economic growth and development? I mean, now.
Well, I think Dr. Gonpu will have more expertise on this particular area when you're talking about macroeconomics. But just from my own experience and knowledge, again, that's something where when you're talking about growth, what kind of growth you're talking about? And I'll give you an example. So let's look at a country like Nigeria, where their GDP is close to $500 billion. Okay, $1 million. So in Liberia or Ghana, maybe Ghana is 60 and Liberia is 3. So when you're talking about things like inflation, it doesn't matter how in terms of the size of the economy, but what can your currency buy? What's the cost of living in that country compared to someplace else? So like he just alluded to, if our exchange rate is kind of negligible, where you have $1,000 Liberian dollar, because most of Liberians civil servants and most of Liberians get paid in Liberian dollars. They don't get paid in US. I know maybe the top people in the country and the bankers and the lawyers and so forth. So they depend on that $1,000 to pay the rent, to buy food, to send their kids to school. Now, all of these things are all tied to the exchange rate, because if you're going to, let's say you go to Don Bosco, and I have nieces and nephews that go to Don Bosco, and it just recently hiked the price of, of the tuition, because Don Bosco has to also pay for things like paint. We don't make paints in Liberia to paint the classroom. We don't make computers in Liberia. We don't make, I would say, chairs and tables and all those things. So if Don Bosco has to collect enough Liberian dollar in order to pay for these things, so as the rate increases, right, the ability to use the Liberian dollar, which the tuition, which is being paid, the students have to pay, diminishes. So it affects the economy in a whole wide way. In terms of employment, our investor is not going to come to Liberia and sell a product in US dollars, because most of the people are paid in Liberian dollar. And if the Liberian dollar keeps eroding, then it doesn't make any sense. So you see most of the people who go to Liberia as foreign investment, why do you think no foreign company or healthcare has gone and say, let me take over JFK? Why? The only thing they're interested in, the foreign investors, the mines, the gold, the diamond, and the contracts, because they get US dollar for it. They're not interested in the Liberian people welfare. They're not interested in, say, running the schools and running and agriculture and things that rely on the local currency. So when I see our public leaders all there chasing foreign investors, I wonder why. The only thing they're going to do to the country is they're going to further hurt the currency. For every new investor that come into the country, when they buy, whether they come in and buy, take the natural resources, or they do a business in Liberia, they convert the Liberian dollar to US dollar at any rate, at the most available rate. And then they ship that US dollar outside the country. What happens? The rate keeps going down and down. That's one way. So again, jobs are hurt, because most of the jobs, mining don't provide a lot of jobs, contrary to what people may think, because it's a heavy equipment intensive industry. And I read a study in Ghana where they, over I think 20 years or so of mining, and the country barely got nothing in return, a paltry amount, and they didn't even hire a lot of people. So again, it goes back to the policymakers and the financial policymaker. I'm very hard on the financial policymaker, because I don't expect someone who doesn't have the background and experience, or who is not a technocrat, to know how macroeconomics work, or to know how rate of return and interest rate and all those things. So it's upon these people who, again, our finance ministers and former finance ministers and economists and analysts, to be the one to express these concerns, to be the one to advise the president and say, no, you don't need to focus on foreign investment. Like if that bureau was going to be developed by foreign investor, Eli Johnson Sirleaf administration, by now Liberia would be one of the most developed countries. There was $16 billion in terms of foreign direct investment that went through Liberia over the 12 years period. And yet, Liberia does not even have a library that is functional. So even if we get $16 billion, even if like a country comes in and they run all the mines in Liberia, the analysis show Liberia will still be poor. So you have to focus on indigenization. You have to focus on local manufacturing that can hire people, that Liberians can invest into, and then a strong central banking policy that will keep rates low so that these industries can flourish. Liberian industry I'm talking about in that sense.
Dr. Gonpu, on macroeconomic, let's go to, let's add on to what he expressed about taxation, income generation, wealth creation, and all the different things that make up macroeconomics. What are the challenges from these areas?
Well, anyway, before we get further into that, let me just speak a little on the issue of foreign investment. In order to keep the battery economy afloat, you need to continue to invest at a certain level, because some of the investment is also to replace depreciating capital. Because anything you invest, when you invest and you use the equipment or use the capital, it's not the same anymore after a number of years, because there's depreciation. So you have to keep investing to replace declining capital, and you also have to add new investments in order to keep generating income, because your population is also growing and the demand for employment is also growing. So the amount of savings in our system is inadequate to support the amount of investment we need to keep this economy growing. So there's that gap between what the amount of investment we need and what we can get from domestic saving. So that gap, foreign direct investment can help to fill that gap. And I think one of the challenges of Liberia has been that we are overly dependent on foreign investment, even though foreign investment is important, it's critical, but in a number of societies that are successful, they do not put 75% or even above 50% of their need for investment to be filled by foreign investment. So in the United States, I think their foreign investment maybe like 25% of the total amount of investment they need, or even less. But for us, it's huge. So foreign direct investment has been helpful, but we are overly dependent on it. And if our institutions don't work, our institutions are weak. It is those very institutions we're talking about, the legislature, the executive, the judiciary, those are the institutions that help to defend us, the Liberians, when it comes to dealing with these foreign investors. So when these institutions are weak, these foreign investors come in and they dictate what they want, how much their taxes are going to be, and our people just sign on the bottom line. Not much argument when you have weak institutions. So in the end, your iron ore is going, your rubber is leaving, your lumber is leaving, but how much are you getting back beyond the little wages they pay you? Not very much, because you are desperate. You put yourself in a situation where you are desperate, and then you sign deals that don't benefit you in the long run. Yeah, so in terms of what's the additional question you brought in?
The taxes.
Okay, the taxation. So the taxation, that's on the fiscal side. That's on the fiscal side. Again, also, institutions again. You have a strong central bank. The central bank can also be very helpful in advising government on the system of taxation. But I think our system right now is also not looking at taxing in ways that help us to grow. Right now, most of the taxes are coming from what I would consider sales tax. Sales tax. So a huge percentage of the tax burden is falling on low-income earners. And that's one of the reasons why you see there is so much complaint in Liberia right now. Because the government needs the revenue, and they basically try to tax by taxing international trade, taxing imports, they're taxing exports very little. But a lot of the taxes we collect right now are mainly sales tax, even though they got different names for them.
That value-added tax.
Yeah, they call, but basically basically the taxes are imposed in such a way that the producers raise their prices in order to account for the tax.
Yeah.
See? So now you're raising your price in order to pay your tax. Who's going to pay that higher price?
Your consumer.
Right, people who are buying. See? So I think we have to restructure, and we're not the prospects part yet, but
yeah. And that's what I want us to get to. But before we get to that, I want you to show me some numbers. There are things that people we kind of throw around: inflation, GDP, and all those things. I wonder if you, first of all, if you have anywhere where I can go to access these numbers on Liberia's inflation. What's the GDP? How is that compared to other countries in the sub-region, so that our people, my viewers, can see where Liberia is when it comes to these numbers?
Okay, so GDP. So let's talk about GDP. What is GDP? And politicians have been throwing around the issue of GDP in recent times. I think the president of Liberia made some comments that we don't know what GDP, we don't care, or we don't know GDP, but we know how to build roads and we know how to meet the people's need. But GDP is basically the monetary value of the total amount of final goods and services produced in the country during a year, usually measured during the year. Yeah. So the new goods that we produce, those new goods that consumers buy, that investors buy, that we are exporting, when we put all of that money together, we put all of the value together, that makes up what we call our GDP. So GDP is a reflection of the amount of income produced in an economy. So what happens to the GDP is important with respect to how much people are going to get paid, how much taxes and revenue the government will be able to get. When GDP grows, the government is more likely to collect more revenue. See? Because when people's income grow, even if the tax rate does not change, people will pay more taxes. Businesses will pay more corporate taxes. And when it comes to the issue of borrowing for all those infrastructure development needs that the country has, yeah, the creditors look at your GDP. Is it growing? Is it getting bigger? How large is it? See, it's almost like when you apply to Citibank or you apply to Bank of America for credit card, or you apply to them for credit for credit line increase. You have a credit card that is at $1,000 and you want your credit card to go up to $10,000, which means that maybe you need another $9,000 in loan from Bank of America. So one of the first questions they ask you is, what's your salary? So they have to look at that salary and they have to look at what is the amount of debt you owe. Then they look at your debt burdens to then determine whether if they give you $10,000 credit line, you'll be able to pay that $10,000 off when you spend it. So they do the same thing for countries. And so the countries, the indicator of the country's income, just as your salary is an indicator of your ability to pay, the indicator for the whole country is the country's GDP. So what's happening to GDP is critical. In recent times, the growth rate, so the growth rate of the GDP is the rate at which the GDP is expanding. See? So in recent times, the GDP has the last year, the GDP did not perform well. The GDP growth rate has been declining. And
Dr. Gonpu, Alex, you were showing something on the GDP. So show
right.
that so that you can speak to what the GDP is, how is it growing or declining, and how is it compared to other countries in the sub-region?
Yeah, so thank you, Dennis. So basically, as Dr. Gonpu was just saying, that's just a measure of our economic activities, kind of like your salary. That's the whole country's salary, how much they're earning on all their goods, all the activity. So in the case of Liberia, and you can get this data from number of different sources. You can get it from World Bank, IMF. You can even get it from the Central Bank of Liberia. But we use this side treaty economics because it's a computation of all the different statistics and economic indicators and what have you. So in this case, we're just doing it at Liberia, and this data goes back, I think, to 1960s, 70s, and you can see each year how we're doing. So for instance, in 2018, we grew at 3.1%. Okay, so let's assume, okay, if that means if our total financial activity was $1 billion, okay, $1 billion, well, it would be what, 30.1 million. We grew, so we only added 30 million, right, on that billion. So to another way to look at it, let's say if we still grow, if we continue to grow at 3.1%, hypothetically, think about how many years. So if we look at other countries' GDP, like let's say Ghana is 60 billion, with 3 billion. Think about how long it would take us if we grew every year. We added $30 million. Some of us will not be around. So the fast, how high we can grow and how fast we can grow. So especially for emerging markets, meaning countries that, you know, they don't have industry. They're just building a new industry. Okay, they're just now trying to manufacture. So in those countries, and Liberia will fall in that category, those countries should grow at a much higher rate because they don't have anything. And I will give you a statistic. One point in Liberia, we grew 100%. This point, you can see on the chart, that's between what, 1998, 99, 100%. So that means our GDP was 1 billion. The next year, we generated so much activity, we double it. There are countries, one point China was growing, I think 13%, 12%. Now it's 7%, 8%, because now they are very more mature economy. So it's very, very key. But then the question Akin will get to is, how do you get this number? How do you grow? It's just like you're in school and you're making F, and you're expecting to enter medical school, law school, or become a Wall Street analyst. No college is going to accept you. No, you know. So how do you get your grades up? There are many ways to get your grades up, and those are some of the things we'll be discussing, you know, over time. So Liberians can get a good sense. So when you're electing somebody, let the person tell you what their plan is to grow from 18%, or 3% to 5%, because that's not magic. That's not. So in this case, I think we all were watching the news when the IMF went to Liberia. So every year the IMF will kind of project and say, well, based on last year, based on similar countries in the economy with the same size of economy activity, you should be growing at 4%. So they will give you that forecast, right? So in Liberia case, our forecast was around 4%, 3%, as you can see here, that indication of the previous forecast that they've been able to give us. So they haven't given us one for 2020 and 2019. Well, 2019 they did, but it's not updated yet. But these are some of the forecasts. See, at one point we're growing in 2012, 8.2%. So our forecast for this year, 2019, has been revised to 0.4% from, I think, 2.6%, 3%. That's troubling. It's kind of like somebody's in an emergency room and you just came out and said the person is going to coma. But you see, Liberians, they don't have no concern with it. So when we see people get agitated, when we see people frustration, a man by the name of Paul Cartier, he's a development economist, very renowned, work at the United Nations, and he did some analysis on the countries that are more likely to have civil conflicts and have all kinds of civil dispute. He did a correlation between the GDP, the GDP drop and the likelihood of that country, you know, becoming a failed state. So that's how important these numbers are. The substance of the country. If the country cannot grow, you cannot build roads, because what you're doing is you're taking money that's supposed to go for something else and you're using to build roads. So you have the roads, but you won't have cars to drive on the roads. So it affects every aspect. There's no country in the world that can say, well, I'm not going to grow. I'm just going to talk my way out of it. And you can't talk your way out of it. This number is you can't you can't corrupt this number.
Yeah.
People know how much they're selling to you. They know how much you're bringing out. You can't hope that it increases. You can't talk your way out of it. The only thing you can do is you can create sound fiscal and monetary policy. Then we'll talk about the central bank. And we'll talk about more about. I just wanted to show some of the statistics.
Please show that graph again. The graph where you show that over 100% increase in GDP. Can you show that graph again?
Yeah, sure. 1 second. So that was right there.
Okay. So here, this graph you're looking at, this I think is when the war ended, the Civil War ended. So this is just around 1997 when the Civil War ended. So during the Civil War, the country is not growing at all because the GDP level is so negative and so low during the Civil War. So when the Civil War ends and you have that election happening in 1997 with stability and laws coming back into play, the economy expands. So that's part of the reason why you see that expansion there. You're growing, you're coming from almost a no production to now in peacetime. So that's a key point there to indicate.
Right.
And the issue of the growth rate is important because, for example, if you grow at 3.1%, it would take you about 23 years for your economy to double in size. Okay, so if our GDP right now per person is around $600, it would take 23 years before we can get each person $1,200.
Yeah,
just as an estimate. But if you grew at 7%, it would take you only 10 years. If you grew consistently at 7%, it would take you only 10 years to double your economy. So that's one of what's happened to China. China has grown at a very high growth rate over the last 20 years consistently. And so they've been able to add so many millionaires and they've been able to get millions and millions of people out of poverty. So GDP growth is important. And then for the Liberian economy. So when you look at the average growth rate during the typical year during the Salif administration, the average GDP growth rate was around 5.2% average. So you can see from the data, there were some years when it grew 8%, 9%, and so forth. Okay. And for the 2 years that Judy Bryant was in power, growth rate for the Liberian economy were around 4% for those 2 years. So per year, this is average per year. Okay. And the Taylor years, the growth rate was much higher because again, the country had not been producing, was just coming out of war, from war to peacetime. And the last year, the revised growth figure for 2018, because George Weah has only been there for 1 year, the growth rate now is, for that year was something like 1.2%. And now 2019 is forecast to be 0.4%. So at the rate we're going, if we don't do some things to turn around, we'll be in negative territory. We might be in negative territory already. And negative growth.
And let me just add this. And so when you even forget the negative, even if we're growing as Dr. G said at 4%, right? It would take about 20 years to double your living standard.
Yes.
So imagine if you better growing 1%.
Right. If you grow 1%, it would take you. If you grow 1%, it would take you 70 years.
Okay. So in that case, so I mean, I think this gives you some perspective now on what we're dealing with in Liberia when you hear GDP, when you hear growth. But let's give an example. So for instance, Libya, right? Libya, we all know that it just had a serious civil war and they grew and they're now at 10.9%, almost 11%, right? Look at a country like Rwanda being out of war for a long time now, since 1990. But look how they've been growing. Then look at the Chad here.
Right.
This is a landlocked country. This is a country with relatively no resources, no natural resources. They don't have diamond, gold. They don't have a coastal line. Rwanda. It's the most densely populated country in Africa. And they still can grow, right? 10%. Consistent. Look at the chart. 1 year where they went negative, that was 2017. But all the time, 4% year. They grew year, 2% year, 6%. And we go further, we can give a better indication here. Look at one point where they're growing almost 14% in 2001. And they're consistently around what the 5%, 4% if you look at the average. So it just gives you some of the indication why, and when people, there's a difference when people talk in politics. When people talk in politics, everybody elect me, I will be a good senator, I'll be a good representative, I'll be a good president. But the question we need to ask ourselves today, not that you're not a good person. I don't personally believe that any Liberian do not love their country. Every Liberian, George Weah loves Liberia, Henry Costa loves Liberia, Dr. G loves Liberia. We all love our country equally. The difference is the approach that we want, our ideas to make the country better are different. And that's what politics should be about. Unfortunately, it's not about that. It's about, oh, I don't like you, or you're not giving me a turn. So let's talk GDP and see, let me hear the different groups. How are you going to grow this number? Tell me. And because you can calculate, you can forecast it. And what institution do we have now to monitor to say, all right, you are finance minister, your deputy finance minister. And I think Dr. Gonpu, I mean, we talk regularly, which is one of the things I also want to use this to encourage other Liberian finance and economists to come, call me, call him. Let's start discussing our economy. But one of the things that he mentioned was—
Hold on, caller. Okay. Mr. Jones, can you stop the screen share? I thought we were going to have time to go into the prospect, but time is against us. And since we hope to make this continuous series, we may. I want us to start entertaining some calls now.
Okay, no question. No.
All right. So you can turn off the screen share.
Okay.
Caller, your name and where you're calling from?
My name is Darling Wawu. I'm calling from Worcester, Massachusetts.
Darling, your question or comment? Welcome to Focus on Liberia.
Thank you very much for having me. And I want to say good evening to Uncle George in the studio. We met, that was sometimes in the early 90s in Ghana. You don't know me anymore, but I remember you very well. Your little brother, our class, because I'm on it.
Oh, okay. Yeah. The name rings a bell.
In Liberia, where our GDP is like, the growth rate or decline rate is at 0.04%.
0.4.
0.4%. You, as a seasoned economist, what do you think the Liberian government can do at this point in order to like move our GDP from practically is going towards a negative?
Yeah,
what can we do to jumpstart the economy at this point in time?
Thank you, sir. You can take your answer off the air.
Okay.
Dr. Gonpu, and that was going to lead us into our prospects. So if you can, we can use that question now, and for 3 minutes, let's just rush through our prospects.
Yeah, GDP is really about the whole economy. So making the economy grow there's not just one thing you can do. There are a number of things that you need to do. So it's almost like, somebody is sick, how do they get well? Well, you don't get well just by going on diet or eating well. Maybe you have to exercise, you have to take some medicine, you have to wash your food and all of these different things. So when it comes to the macroeconomy, there are so many different things that need to be done. But I think some of the easier things to do immediately is to start respecting our own laws. Once you start respecting your laws, you build credibility. We want the citizens to find their officials credible, to begin to believe in those who work for them as officials. And that means that these officials have to do their jobs. They have to enforce the law irrespective of who it impacts. So basic things like the anti-corruption fight is critical. We need to do that because, again, the issue of people knowing that when they put their money in the bank, the money is going to be there. Because in the past, people have put money in the bank, people have lent money to government. For example, the national savings bonds. Liberians lend over $8 million of their money. I was one of those people who invested in that national savings bonds in the 80s. The central bank right now has a record of that whole thing in terms of who all gave money. They have the record there. And by 1997, the total amount that the government was owing on those bonds were over $30 million. So when you borrow from your citizens and you don't pay it back, that damages credibility. And when people stop believing in you, believing in your money, then the desire to even hold our money declines, and all of that has impact on what we call now the exchange rate getting high, which is basically depreciating, making the cost of living high and everything more and more unaffordable. So basic things like building credibility is important. As we build credibility, there are rich people in Liberia, they will become more confident to bring their money out. A lot of money being hoarded into many different sectors in Liberia right now. The Lebanese are holding on to millions of dollars. The foreign, the foreign investors, they're holding on to millions of dollars. I know about a Chinese company that were bringing in $500 million. They had $1 billion mapped out, 500 million for Guinea, and 500 million for Liberia. After they've already started doing their work in Guinea and they decided to come to Liberia, just 2 weeks ago, a friend, the guy who was coordinating for them on the ground, called me and said the people decided to pull back to wait and see because the society is unstable. And why is the society unstable? Is because part of the reason is because of the lack of credibility. So respecting our own laws. If we're not going to obey laws, we should not make them. We make the law. So if you make your own laws and you don't obey them, you're sending the signals that you cannot be trusted. So those are some basic places to begin. The declaration of assets is important, making sure that there is accountability. All of this money that came into the country, the $16 billion, trying to basically be accountable for it in terms of saying, here it is, here is where it is, this is what we're going to do to get it back. Those things need to be done. So those are just some basic first steps that we need to take in order to begin to turn the situation around. Then when credibility is improved, then we can begin to talk about expansion for domestic investment, international investment, and all kinds of different tools that we can use to help make the economy grow faster.
Thank you. Mr. June, let's talk about prospects. We saw all the challenges. And with prospects, because you listed the role of these institutions. So let's talk about the private institution, the public institution, investment, and all the different things. What are the prospects?
I tend to be an optimist on Liberia, which is very, very unusual. I think we have some good numbers. One, we have a very small population, which is good, meaning we can have a higher per capita. And just to break that down, meaning if we divided the GDP by the number of citizens, we should be around like Bermuda, where they have over $50,000 per person. So Liberia can get it quite easily if our GDP grows. Another thing, as much as we have debt, we have very low debt to GDP compared to many nations. And I did I ran the numbers. Our debt is very low in terms of debt to GDP. And I must give the previous government or the programs, the HIPAA program, some credit for getting rid of our previous debt. I think we have some institutions. We're not at war. That's a good thing. We need to celebrate the fact that at least today we can have political debates, we can have elections. We may not always think that those things were, they're good enough. But the ground has been laid. The part where I'm very concerned about in terms of the prospect is getting the right people in the right place. Okay. I've been a manager, and one of the key thing that I would say the key to any success, whether you're a football coach or you're a CEO, you have to hire the right people. I mean, that's the beginning of your success. If you don't hire the right people in critical technical areas, such as currency management, investment, trade negotiations, institution building. We talk about corruption all the time, but why corruption is so prevalent in Liberia? Simply because we don't have check and balances. It's not the fact that people in America are less corrupt or people in Great Britain are less corrupt. If they had the same kind of leeway that they have in Liberia, they'll do the same thing. But we don't. So you have to set policies. You have to have the check and balance. And then I will go back to the central bank. The central bank is the industry, I mean, the institution in Liberia that has that power by constitution to set in policies to regulate all financial institutions, whether you insurance company, your bank. So those are what those are the low-hanging fruit that I would say. Focus on attracting the best Liberians to come together and talk about ways of how they can make that non-political, first of all. Forget about parties and who this person worked for. For example, why should Dr. Gonpu be in America? There's a very sound economist, one of the, I never met him. I read some of his papers. I saw his interview and I contacted him. And he's a very brilliant man. And we talk, we debate, we disagree, we argue, but he's a very brilliant man. I wouldn't care which party he's for. He should be in Liberia, either running the central bank or helping to run the central bank. So those are the things that we can do. When you get people with credibility and knowledge in place, then they will come up with a policy. They will come up with a proposal to the House of Representatives and the president and what have you. But at this time, I'm very concerned that we don't have the experienced people. They're mostly people who are smart, they have the education, but they haven't worked in this sector. So it would take some time for them to catch up. So basically, get the right people, get them as quickly as possible to go in and give them the resources to sit down around the table and say, how can we get our GDP, or how can we have hiring of 10,000 people per year? Young people, the people who throw rocks in the stone, if they had jobs, I guarantee you, they will be at their jobs. Mm-hmm. So those are the things that we can fix. Policies by competent Liberians, and we have plenty of them. You, for example, you're doing a good job with this show. Why are you in America? Why aren't your government calling you to go back home and set up program at the Ministry of Internal Affairs? And so these are things that we can fix. But we can fix the bigger things. We can change the country overnight, change all the laws, but we can at least get competent people with integrity and that have the track record. We can do that. And any government that doesn't do that is foolish, or their heads needs to be checked, because you need people to win.
And also on the issue of employment and competence, okay, there are positions in government that are referred to as political positions, and there are other positions that are referred to as civil service positions. See? So those political positions are places where the president has the liberty to nominate, and then the Senate reviews and approve or disapprove. So many of the technical positions that are supposed to be supporting the political appointments are civil service oriented. People go into those positions have to qualify, or they need to qualify in terms of experience. They need to take exams and all of these things. These are the way in which you have a strong civil service system. And I think those things need to be respected. It seems like that whole system has kind of broken down. There is almost like no real separation now between civil service position and these political appointments, especially with in recent times, with the new government coming in. So many appointments have been made that are supposed to be civil service oriented. They go directly through civil service, not through presidential appointment. But it appeared to me like that line have been blurred in terms of where the civil service, civil service job, distinguishing them from the other jobs. And it's important to recognize this, because one of the challenges that they're having right now is with respect to the issue of the wage bill. See, why does the IMF need to come to tell us that our wage bill is too high? Didn't we see the numbers in terms of what we're able to do? Think about one of the things that Salif did when she came in, and she was heavily criticized. She came in and there was something called right sizing, which really ended up being downsizing.
Right.
Got rid of a number of people, reduced the workforce, the government workforce, until the economy started growing. See, when the economy started growing, then she started bringing people back in. See, but I think this CDC administration made some errors by coming in and expanding the payroll significantly. I'm not seeing the numbers, but I've heard that the payroll has gone up. So if you have a broken economy, which yourself made reference to as you came in, why don't you wait until your economy start picking up before you bring all these people in?
I listened to the Deputy Information Minister. He said that's why they did the salary harmonization, and that was able to generate money that they are using to pay for some of these things. But
yeah,
before you answer that, I have a question from our audience viewers on Facebook. Jimmy Eastman, he said about income distribution. First of all, he disagrees. He said GDP per capita is not a good measure of development. But I think he was speaking to what one of you said, and then he wants you to speak to what is their advice on income distribution.
Yeah, very good point. Very good point. GDP per capita, the GDP size is not a good measure of development. Development is much broader. We've had that discussion. GDP per capita and GDP growth is an indicator. So it's like, yeah, we look at the family's salary or the head of the household salary to tell how rich the household is. Are the children in that household happy? We can't tell. Just by seeing that their father makes $150,000 does not tell us that the children are happy. See? So that's basically what the caller is saying, which is true. So the distribution now is another story you have to look at, because they may be making $150,000 and you go into the casino to play the casino, and the children are not, getting their tuition paid, or he's not buying food. So they're going to be unhappy. So the distribution issue is important. That's where we look at the tax policy. We look at the tax, and that's what we made some references to the tax system. You see, that's why the idea of a progressive tax is implemented in some countries, including this country, so that the people who make a lot more pay a little more, and people who make less pay less, and then we use a little more those taxes to then fund education, fund healthcare, fund transportation, to make it, to reduce the cost of living on the lower income people, and that helps to reduce inequality. That helps to make the distribution a little bit fairer. See? But the GDP is important because we need to know how much we have to divide. We need to know how much income we have to divide. It doesn't help us to say let everybody be equal when we don't have the income to even raise the people at the bottom. So he's right that GDP per capita doesn't say that we are developed. But if we have a lot of rich people, then we can say, okay, now let's look at our tax system to tax them, make them pay a little more tax so that we can fund the public schools. And then that way we can help. It basically like we can transfer some of that income to the less fortunate. So I agree that it doesn't answer the question. That's why it's not just one thing we need to do. We need to do so many things at the same time.
Right.
All right. We'll soon be concluding. Let me take one more caller. Caller, your name and where you calling from?
My name is Christopher, and I'm calling from Canada.
Christopher, your question or comments? Welcome to Focus on Liberia.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I just wanted to commend the two fine gentlemen that you have on your show. I think your show is a really great show. But the one thing that I wanted to suggest, not a question per se, but so from what I see the conversation going, they have some very good background in our economic development as well as financing and helping to change the trajectory of where our country is at the moment into the right direction. Given that the government have not reached out to experts like they are, I would suggest that why don't they reach out to the government with their credentials and not think about, oh, I'm not going to beg for a job, but rather going with the effort of going to help the country. I don't know if they have done that before or not, but I think it would be a good idea because what they're saying tonight, I really like that.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
So, Des, I mean, you can do this stuff, man. Why don't you reach out to the government and say, because, and I myself, even before people say that, oh, you are begging for a job. What the caller is saying, hey, this is our country and we must all help to make it better. So it may be personal, but what step have you made to get an employment or go to Liberia and help? Or if you're thinking about that?
I'm thinking about it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the caller made a very good point that we need to sometimes go out there and see how we can help instead of just sitting on the sideline. So that's a very good point, and I think I would strongly consider doing so, and not just with this government, but any government to come or any political party.
Right. And one of the comments on Facebook say, "You're not going to get it because you are not a CDC or a sedition." I want to be optimistic, Dr. Gonpu.
I mean, look, the loyalty to the state comes first. Loyalty to our country should be paramount to political affiliations and particular individuals. I worked for the Salif administration. I was not one of her strong supporters at the time she was running for president, but I wanted to serve. And the thing is, I mean, service to country doesn't necessarily mean you have to be in government to do it. So I am engaged with our society. I advise young people in young economists who are working in the system in Liberia. And I participate in policy research. So basically, I think that the restructuring of our economy and the attempt to try to improve it, I don't think it's just, I mean, I alone will not change it overnight. I think the government needs to, if the government wants good people, and if the government agrees that human capital is important, it has to make it part of its central policy. It has to engage its people, particularly these very strong partisans, to let them know that, we are all Liberians, and because someone is not a member of the ruling party, it does not necessarily make them an enemy of the government or an enemy of the country. Because look, the leader of the country is under a lot of pressure, in the sense that right now, look at what the comment that Solomon George made and other people. I'm sure you follow those comments, that the reason why they lost the election is because not enough seditions are in those positions. That in fact, someone who is a high official in the party recommended that the finance ministry right now should dismiss half of the workforce, replace them by seditionists. And that's, that will help them win more positions. So the president is in that kind of situation where you need the loyalty and the support of your partisans, and at the same time, you need to do the job. So it's not just that easy to just say, well, this person is qualified, I'm just bringing them in. No, you really have to make it a policy. Right. You have to go out and talk to your people for them to understand that when the economy grows, we do it right, we get the right people, the economy grows, everybody enjoys, whether you are in a position or not. But right now, the way things are going, people who are not party loyalists and are in those critical positions are almost at risk. There's a whole list circulating on the internet of people who are in government positions who are being targeted because partisans do not believe that they are loyal enough, and they're being blamed for everything that's going wrong.
Okay. So we are focused on Liberia. We want to help in that direction. We want to harness, because we talk to many of these experts, and so we in contact with them. So what we're trying to do is to create a repository of all these different people. So government, if you are listening, you can reach out to us. We know where to find them, and we are creating a database that will soon may be made public, depending on how much help we get to make this to go live with this very soon. So that we want somewhere where people in Liberia, being the government or the private sector, can reach out, go on our website, and you'll be able to find whatever you want, from plumber to economists to healthcare to doctors and everything. But I have my last caller on the line. Caller, your name and where you calling from?
I'm Mohammed Duke. I'm calling from Minnesota.
Duke, welcome to Focus on Liberia. Your question or comment?
Yes, I'm going to make some comments. And the good speakers are very, very good in their field. But what I would like to add into this discussion is growth and development work hand in hand. If there's a growth, a good policy maker will make better use of development in the country. As a result, it will be a win-win situation for all citizens or residents in that particular country, like in the case of Liberia. Back again, growth. Liberia have sustained some growth before, like in the top beta, but there was no development.
Right.
There was no development in Liberia, but there was growth. Now, in this current administration, things are not moving like the way that they should be moved. In order to get both growth and development, there should be a good legal system in a country. But our legal system is kind of poor. There should be trust in the legal system, and the legislature should also be ready to work in the interest of the people.
Right. Thank you.
And both the legislature and the judiciary are kind of weak. Now, for investors to come to Liberia, people look at institutions that are in place.
Right.
If they are strong, investor will say yes, it is good. But if they are weak, investor will be so afraid to invest. Except investors that can more likely go are investors that are kind of shaded, shaded in company, where they will be able to work in the black market environment.
Right, like the arm dealers.
A good company will always love to work in a stability environment where they will be able to forecast their profit.
Right. Okay.
So if these things are lacking in the country, it will be very, very difficult for investors to be in. So your speakers are very, very good. And I thank them for this kind of discussion for our country, Liberia. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Brooklyn.
Dave.
And we
Thank
hope to continue this. And but we will be coming out with a fixed schedule so that we can continuously talk about the development, the growth and development, talk about the economy. Because if we don't talk, somebody else is going to fill the void. So let's wrap this up. I want us to conclude and set the stage for another discussion. There was a question about the 25 million mop up, and which was supposed to, but we'll continue on this. We will continue this discussion. So let me have your final thoughts, and we're going to call it a night. Mr. Jones.
Well, first, I'm very excited, and I think our country will eventually develop. South Korea was in the same situation was in, Germany, Rwanda, and you name it, Chile. So Liberia, let us just be a little hopeful. All is not lost. We came from a very difficult past. We're somewhere where we need to do a little better in terms of management, corruption, bringing the right people on board, having the right policy. So my only plea is let's try to put some of the politics aside and let's work on our economy. Again, as Bill Clinton once said, it's the economy is stupid. Thank you very much. And I would love to be back anytime.
Thank you, Alex. Dr. Gonpu.
Thank you so much, Dennis. I think this is a good beginning. And I also want to thank our audience for listening to us and for all of the engaging questions that they presented. I think that we are one of the blessed countries in the world in terms of what God has given us, in terms of natural resources, in terms of our abilities to learn. And we have so many young people who want to learn. They also want and they pray for good role models to help guide them in their own development. So we Liberians across the world basically have to make a commitment and dedication to our country to fight to help ensure that our country rises to its full potential. We should be directing the show in West Africa because we got independence in that region in 1847. All the rest of the country started getting independence in the 1950s, after 1955. So we have been collecting our own revenue. We have been in charge of our own economy. Why are we so far behind? We have had difficulty even responding to the very problem that exists in every society. Every society has similar kind of problems as we have. The corruption issue, the looting of state, the abuse of power, malfeasance, misfeasance, all of these things. But interestingly, other societies decide to handle this differently. But for us, it has been as such that people do not want to face the problem. People want to kick the can down the road with dishonesty and a lack of integrity to stand up when the problems start happening. And our people say prevention is better than cure. So when we begin to see these problems, we find ways as citizens to come together, have discussions as to how we solve those problems before they destroy the society. Because with, the Civil War, it happened because there were problems that we refused to solve. And we just basically took political sides and said, the president is always right. And putting our heads under the sand, this whole thing degenerated into destruction at cost. So we don't want that to happen again. We have an opportunity. The world doesn't want to see that again. So let's be honest about our issues. Let's be less partisans. Let's face the issue and let's be truthful about those things that bother us. And we can solve these problems. They've been solved in other places before. We have the ability, we have the human capacity, and we just need to basically bring them together. Let the leadership step out, admit to some of these things, admit to some of these weaknesses. Let not everything be partisan. Go to the United Nations. The president, you come to the United Nations, maybe in September, or I don't know whether he's coming, but there's another United Nations situation. Present our issues. Here are our challenges. Don't just come and say, oh, we just want to maintain the peace. We just want to maintain the peace. Maintaining the peace is good, but there are so many fundamentals. People have to eat. People have to send their kids to school. Hospitals have to work. People have to have electricity in order to live viable life, and those things help to maintain the peace. You cannot just maintain the peace just by talking to people, let's be peaceful, when these guys are getting hungry.
Yeah.
So we have a long way to go. We can't say everything tonight, but I think this is a good beginning. I think the country has huge potential. Some of the countries that are doing 100 times, 1,000 times more than what we are doing in terms of production. They are no smarter than us. We've all gone to very similar institutions, and they can go and apply their knowledge. But then we can go to apply our knowledge because we got this kind of culture that is resistant to progress. People talk about progress only for political correctness. When it comes to walking the walk, to fight corruption, to be honest, to treat our fellow citizens equally, then everybody begin to run for cover. So it's time to stop that and begin to really do the work that's needed to catch up with the rest of the region. We can't afford to stay behind as we are. So thank you very much.
And I want to thank you so much for coming and freely giving your knowledge. I want to appreciate the two of you. We want to appreciate all our guests, all our audience, our viewers on Facebook, and even those who will watch this show later and continue to share it. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. That way, anytime we have a show there, you're able to watch it. I mean, we have put together some great shows on that. You can learn from it, continue to share it. We have had, good feedback on how good we are doing with what we are doing, educating, elevating, and promoting all things Liberia. This Saturday, we're going to, our schedule is full. This Saturday, we're going to have the candidate for District 15 elections, Ms. Talia Ure, is going to be our guest. We are almost concluding the discussion to have her to give us update on her campaign and also some of the issues that happened lately. We'll get update on Saturday. So hopefully Saturday at 2 p.m., come right back here, focus on Liberia, and we're going to present Talia Ure. On Sunday, Dr. Herbert Brewer and Mrs. Cotto Reeves William will be here to present class structures in Liberia. Most of the time we talk about ethnicity, people are tribe, but they say no, it's all about class structure. So we'll talk a little bit about our social stratification when it comes to Liberia. Is it about tribe or is it about class structure? So that's something you don't want to miss. Keep it here, focus on Liberia. Well, again, I want to say thank you so much for joining us tonight on behalf of my co-host, Danielle Knuckles-Guishard, and also my guest relations manager and my product engineer, Stephanie Setro. We say thank you so much and have a good and godly night. We started with D12, so why don't we continue with D12? Is it because of, not because I have a bad brain? You hungry? I sure eat.
All right, good night, Dennis and Dr. G.
So guys, I want to once again thank you. Good night and God bless.
Thank you.
Good night.